$286,000 for 24 feet. Read that again, because at first, the Airstream Interstate 24 GT sounds like a bad joke. For that kind of money, you could buy a very serious house in some parts of America. You could buy a performance car. You could buy a much larger motorhome. Or you could take the money, buy a normal camper, and still have a very large amount left over. So why would anyone look at a 24-foot Mercedes van and think, yep, that's the one? That is the question. And the answer has almost nothing to do with square footage. Because the Interstate 24 GT isn't trying to give you the most room. It's trying to give you the most freedom without making you give up the things you normally refuse to live without. And once you see what Airstream has packed into this thing, the price gets a lot harder to dismiss. Welcome to Freedom on Wheels. And today, we're looking at one of the strangest luxury vehicles on the road. The 2026 Airstream Interstate 24 GT, a 24-foot, 6-inch touring coach built on a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter 3500 extended AWD chassis, with four-wheel traction, diesel power, a serious lithium electrical system, a proper bathroom, a kitchen, a bed, a workspace, and enough technology to make a tiny aluminum box feel surprisingly close to a real home. But here's the catch. Everything has to fit inside the same narrow shell. And that's where this gets interesting. Because building a huge luxury motorhome is one thing. Building a luxury home when you have almost nowhere to put anything is a completely different problem. The 24 GT starts with a machine most people already know, the Mercedes-Benz Sprinter 3500. But this isn't the basic van sitting behind a contractor's office. The AWD version uses a 2.0-liter turbocharged four-cylinder diesel producing 208 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. Power goes through a 9G Tronic automatic transmission. The coach carries an 11,030-pound GVWR and a 15,250-pound gross combined rating. Airstream lists up to 5,000 pounds of towing capacity, depending on the actual build and load. And the body stretches 24 feet 6 inches from nose to tail. That number doesn't sound especially impressive until you walk through it, because Airstream didn't waste the extra length. They attacked the problem from every direction. The ceiling is about 6 feet 2 inches high. The interior is only about 5 feet 10 inches wide. That's narrower than most people imagine when they hear the words luxury motorhome. Yet this thing has to perform several jobs at once. Living room, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, office, garage, power station, and highway cruiser. One room, 5 or 6 different purposes. Every single inch has to pull its weight. That's the real engineering story here. Not how many cup holders there are. Not how many screens are installed. It's the fact that a vehicle this small is constantly changing what it is. During the day, it's a lounge. At night, it's a bedroom. When you need to work, it becomes an office. When you're hungry, it becomes a kitchen. When you wake up somewhere with no facilities around, it becomes your bathroom. And then you shut the door, start the engine, and the whole house moves. That's the trick. The house doesn't have to stay where you built it. You take the house with you. But that creates another problem. Power. A luxury interior is easy when you're plugged into a campground. It's a very different story when you're sitting somewhere beautiful with no power pedestal, no extension cord, and no building for miles. The 2026 Interstate 24 GT comes standard with Airstream's advanced power system. 3 heated leaf APO for lithium batteries provide 10.3 kilowatt-hours of coach energy storage. A 3,000-watt pure sine inverter feeds the coach. There is a 400-watt solar system on the roof. And Airstream says the system is designed for off-grid use without relying on shore power. Think about what that means. You're not carrying electricity because it's convenient. You're carrying your own little power grid. You can cook without propane. You can keep the refrigerator running. You can charge your devices. You can run the entertainment system. And you can live more normally while parked somewhere that absolutely does not feel normal. There is even an optional advanced power plus setup that increases the battery capacity to 17.2 kilowatt hours. That is an enormous amount of stored energy for something that still looks like a Mercedes van from the outside. And then Airstream solves another problem people don't think about until they're actually out there: heat and hot water. The 24 GT uses a diesel-fired hydronic heating and hot water system. So the same fuel source that moves the vehicle can also help keep the cabin warm and provide hot water. There is a 13,500 BTU air conditioner for the opposite problem. And the tanks are sized with 23 gallons of fresh water, 24 gallons of gray water, and 11 gallons for waste. Again, none of those numbers sound huge, because they're not. This isn't a 40-foot coach. That's exactly the point. The 24 GT isn't pretending you have infinite resources. It's designed around knowing that you don't. And that changes how you travel. You start thinking differently. How much water do I really need? How much food should I bring? Where will I stop? What matters enough to take with me? That last question might actually be the most important one, because tiny spaces force decisions, and luxury becomes less about having more and more about choosing better. Now open the side door. This is where the whole thing gets almost ridiculous, because you expect to see a van. Instead, the cabin feels like Airstream took a luxury hotel room, cut it into pieces, and then figured out how to put those pieces back together inside a Sprinter. There's ultra-leather seating, matte finish cabinetry, flush-mounted cabinets with solid doors, a signature aluminum ceiling, synthetic marine-style flooring, adjustable LED lighting, power day and night shades, 2 widescreen smart TVs, USB charging, a built-in workstation, pantry storage, overhead lockers, and storage underneath the rear bed area. None of that is revolutionary on its own. The clever part is how little space each feature demands. The table can move, the seats can swivel, the rear sofa transforms. The room changes shape depending on what you need. And then you hit the sleeping area. The rear power sofa folds down into a bed measuring 70 by 82 inches. That's about the size of a proper home mattress. And that changes the feeling of the vehicle, because during daylight hours, you don't have a bedroom taking up the back of the coach. You have a lounge. At night, press a control, and the lounge disappears. The bed takes its place. No giant wall, no separate bedroom hallway, no wasted corridor, just transformation. That's what you pay for in a vehicle like this. Not magic, not extra room. The ability to make one room behave like 4. Then there's the bathroom. A real wet bath, a toilet, a sink, a shower, an articulated mirror, towel rack, retractable clothesline. It's tight. Of course it's tight. But now imagine the alternative. You're parked next to a lake. It's raining. It's freezing outside. And you don't have to open the door. You don't have to walk anywhere. You don't have to find a public restroom. You simply turn around, close the bathroom door, take a shower, and get back into your warm cabin. Suddenly, that little bathroom doesn't feel little. It feels like the reason you brought the entire machine with you. The kitchen follows the same logic. A 1,000-watt single-burner induction cooktop, a drawer-style microwave, a 6.6 cubic foot refrigerator with freezer, storage where Airstream could find it, and a layout that doesn't pretend you're preparing Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people. You're making coffee, heating food, cooking dinner, keeping the basics close. That's enough. And that word, enough, is what makes the 24 GT so interesting. Because almost every luxury product tries to convince you that you need more. More horsepower, more rooms, more leather, more screens, more space, more status. The Interstate takes a different route. It tries to convince you that you can have less, without feeling like you've lost anything. And outside, the Mercedes part of the equation becomes important again. The driver gets a proper Mercedes cockpit, heated power-adjustable seats, a leather steering wheel, MBUX infotainment, voice controls, Apple CarPlay, Android capability, wireless phone charging, rear and side camera monitoring, blind spot monitoring, parking sensors, adaptive electronic stability systems, And the AWD model pairs the 24 GT's compact footprint with air ride suspension. This is not a vehicle designed only to sit in a campground. It's meant to spend a lot of its life moving. That's why the Sprinter Foundation matters. Because when you're spending nearly $286,000, you don't want something that only feels luxurious when it's parked. You want the drive itself to be part of the experience. And that creates one of the biggest advantages of the 24 GT: size. A giant motorhome gives you more room, but it also gives you more restrictions. You think about low bridges, tight roads, parking lots, fuel stations, old towns with narrow streets, overhanging trees, small campsites. The 24 GT still has limits. It's almost 8 feet wide with its mirrors and about 9 feet 9 inches tall with the air conditioning and antenna. But compared with a bus-sized coach, it is still a very different proposition. You can drive it into places where a huge motorhome would become a problem before the adventure even starts. And that changes what travel means. You don't necessarily have to plan around the vehicle. You can start planning around the destination. That's powerful. But now, we have to come back to the $286,000, because this is where the fantasy ends. The Interstate 24 GT starts around $285,900. And that is before we turn this into an argument about whether it's a smart financial decision. Because honestly, it's probably not about being smart. It's about what you value. There are people who see $286,000 and think, that's insane. And there are people who see the exact same number and think, that's the price of never booking another hotel room for the kind of trips I want. Neither reaction is automatically wrong. They're simply measuring different things. The first person is buying a vehicle. The second person is buying a lifestyle. And there is something very human behind that. We spend years building routines. Same house, same neighborhood, same roads, same traffic, same alarm clock. Then one day, we look at a map and feel that itch. What if we went there? What if we stayed longer? What if we didn't have to come home yet? Most people answer that feeling with a vacation. The Interstate answers it with a set of keys. That's a very different kind of freedom. And it isn't the freedom of being completely disconnected. This vehicle still has Wi-Fi-ready connectivity. It still has screens. It still has a Mercedes infotainment system. You can work from it. You can charge your laptop. You can cook lunch. You can shower. You can sleep. You can stay connected without staying in one place. That's why I think the 24 GT is more interesting than a giant luxury motorhome. A giant motorhome says, look at how much I brought. The Interstate says, look at how little I need. And maybe that's what you're really paying for. Not the aluminum, not the cabinetry, not the Mercedes-Benz chassis, not even the batteries. You're paying for the ability to compress the parts of a comfortable life that matter most into something small enough to move. A bed, a shower, a meal, a desk, a warm room, a cold drink, a little privacy, and a road outside. That's it. 24 feet. And a lot of possibility. Because when you think about it, the most expensive thing you can lose isn't money. It's time. Time spent waiting. Time spent commuting. Time spent arranging your life around a place you don't even want to be. The people who buy something like this aren't necessarily trying to own the biggest RV. They may be trying to own the smallest thing that lets them live exactly the way they want. And that is a much more interesting reason to spend $286,000. The Airstream Interstate 24 GT is not a mansion. It's not a bunker. It's not an off-road monster. And it doesn't need to be. It's something more focused. A luxury room that happens to have an engine. A travel machine that happens to have a bed. A Mercedes that happens to carry your kitchen and bathroom. And a tiny piece of home that doesn't know where it's going tomorrow. Maybe that's the entire appeal. Because home used to mean one place. Now, for some people, home is wherever they decide to stop. And if you've got the keys in your hand, you don't have to know where that place is yet. That's the strange promise sitting behind a $286,000 price tag. Not more, not bigger. Just go. Go farther. Stay longer. Turn left. Take the road you normally ignore. Wake up somewhere you have never seen before. Then make coffee, open the door, and decide what happens next. That is what the Airstream Interstate 24 GT is really selling. 24 feet of engineered space, wrapped around a much bigger idea: freedom. And perhaps the most luxurious thing about it isn't what it carries, it's what it lets you leave behind. Thanks for watching Freedom on Wheels. And remember, sometimes the machine isn't the destination. Sometimes it's the reason you finally leave.